Hey Void, how you doing? Now, I talk a lot about nostalgia and nostalgic series, movies, classics on my show. One thing I'm not nostalgic for is buying anime in the 90s to early 2000s. Now that was a nightmare. These days, you can get a full season or half a season, maybe, depending on it, for 30 to 50 bucks, depending. Or cheaper when things go on sale. Now, this was not the case back in the day. Back in the day, they released discs individually with about 4 episodes each. Now, not only did that make a major space issue for storage, but it was incredibly expensive because each one of these would run about 30 bucks a pop. Price gouging at its finest. So, what then 20 to 30, I suppose, depending. Now, that means a series would run you about 120 to 150 bucks. Dark times. Now, I've been waving around this case here, and now, thankfully, I didn't spend nearly that much, since the first one I got on sale used for about 20 for 4 discs. I thought this was a whole series at the time, mind you. Found out it wasn't, but I was able to get the other ones for just a couple dollars each, used online. So, today, we'll be talking about The Last Exile, the Studio Gonzo film with some beautiful animation and some breathtaking scenery, as well as a really interesting world that thrusts you into. The world building in itself is kind of what sets this series apart, as it doesn't really hold your hand with it. It just kind of drops you in and lets you pick up things as it goes along, and never really stops to just spoon feed it to you. But it does it in a way that still you understand what's happening as it goes along. Pretty much a world where places are so spread out that you need planes to get around. And the water is incredibly scarce. There's a giant maelstrom of a storm that separates two countries, and those countries have been at war forever, moderated by a group known as the Guild, which is also who gave them their flight technology. So, it's a cool setup. Our story focuses mainly on two van ship pilots. That's what they call the pretty much two-person ships. This is a very steampunk isn't quite the right term, though they do have like steam-powered muskets. Everything seems to be filled by a MacGuffin liquid called Claudia, which is the fluid that makes things float. So it's what gives all the planes and vehicles their lift. Anyway, Klaus and Lavi are our two intrepid heroes who are just there's a pair of orphans whose fathers died in the big storm known as the Grand Stream, and they're essentially just trying to get by and maybe win a race or two if it's possible, while souping up their father's vanship. As well, on a race, they happen upon the plot MacGuffin, a young girl named Alvis, who's as her plane in and the plane she's in gets gunned down while being stalked by the Guild mysteriously. So they pretty much accept a mission to escort her to a ship known as the Sylvana, which is a near legendary ship known for its known as the Kill 'Em All Sylvana. And to some groups, it's a heroic vigilantes. Others, they're bloodthirsty pirates. No one is quite sure what the Sylvana is up to, but they're not a ship to take lightly. After delivering them to her, they decide, I guess the best term, to stay on board and to protect her, not knowing exactly what's going on, before getting embroiled into a three-way political showdown between the nation of Dissith, which is the nation on the other side of the Grand Stream, their nation Anatare, with its chivalry-obsessed government, and the Guild, who are just laughing as they oversee everything, just as if watching their pets fight. So it's there's a lot going on. It's going to be impossible to explain the mainstays of the plot of this one in one of my usual video lengths, but it's packed full of memorable characters. I first saw this thing more than a decade ago, and I still remember characters' names that long thereafter, including minor characters. A lot of this film, the series, stuck with me. Now, it does have a flaw here or there. I mentioned that it doesn't really spoon feed you things, so at times it is easy to get lost in this world of what's exactly going on, particularly towards the end. The series is called Last Exile. It doesn't really go into what that is until at least halfway through, and even then, by the end of it, it's not completely clear. It's exactly what it's supposed to be doing. You get the impression that's mostly into terraforming to make the world a bit more habitable, as well as having more essentially as a colony ship. But why it works the way it does is never really gone into, and you just have to kind of roll with it. Also, who the guild are, where they came from, and why they do what they do, it's never really expounded upon, other than the fact that their leader or maestro is batshit fucking insane. With that said, her younger brother Dio is also batshit fucking insane, but he is a delight. And is one of the just watching Dio's antics through the series is one of the highlights here. Also, then I will say the film does definitely not pull its punches. For characters are not safe. It was not afraid to take a shots at some characters, though. Admittedly, some characters' survivabilities are a little bit ambiguous towards the end, unless you see the sequel series, when it finally actually explains it. One character in particular, they only vaguely hint at his survival. But overall, it's beautiful to look at. The characters are what they go through is and how they react to things is fairly believable. Though I will say the main two, I didn't have too much of a problem with them on my first viewing, but on the subsequent one, now that I'm much older, is you want to shake these kids for they're trying to interfere with things that are way above their heads at the time before properly understanding anything. So it's like one of those guys just assess the situation before making some decisions about what you're trying to do and why. But other than that, normally I prefer to review then for reviewing series it's a little tricky for me. What I'm going to be doing for the most part is if reviewing an entire series all at once, unless there's like clear separate things to divide up. Like a series like this one, there is a second season, Last Exile Family Silver Wing, but that follows an entirely separate group of characters on a separate plot line. But if the show is like one main continuing story, I would review that all at once. And a few things are going to be more case-by-case basis. But this one, I'm just reviewing the original series, which was circa 2003. So, it's itself. Actually, I think that's just when the American releases. I think this one was 2002 or so. No, it's 2003. Anyway. But yeah, so this thing's almost hitting its 20th anniversary, so damn, I'm feeling old. Alright, but if you haven't seen Last Exile, it's definitely worth a check out. It's beautiful to look at, and the characters are a lot of fun. Alright. Take care, have a good... Oh, MacGuffins. Right. We'll give them 7 MacGuffins. It's not one I'm going to return to very often, but it is fun to revisit every once in a while. And the soundtrack is good. Alright. Catch you guys later.